Hello, everyone. I think it has been almost a month since we met last time, so this is EUROSTUDENT Talks again. Today, we are going to talk about study conditions in Luxembourg, but we are going to do that through the lens of data visualization. How to visualize research results and how to do it in a bit more interesting and unusual way. This is the thing that we are going to find out today. And I'm very, very happy to have here our speaker, Emilia Kmiotek-Meyer. Hello, Emilia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, indeed, it's our pleasure. Emilia has been a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Cologne since 2019. Between 2019 and 2023, she coordinated the project called Successful at the Labor Market, which focused on higher education graduates' competencies using Q methodology. Now Emilia works at the Institute of Sociology and Social Psychology as postdoc researcher and lecturer in statistics. Since 2022, she is also a freelancer in statistics, R, and data visualization. Her latest project is called Attitudes Towards Statistics Among University Students. Emilia obtained her PhD from the University of Luxembourg in 2019, and her thesis focused on credit and degree student mobility from Luxembourg. Before, she was in charge of tracer studies at the University of Cologne. Her research interests lie at the intersection of higher education, transition studies, and life course research, and she combines both qualitative and quantitative methods. I think it's all from my side, and I can already give the floor, or let's say the screen, to you, Emilia, so feel free.
Thank you very much, Marlene. So let me share my screen. So hello, everybody, also from my side. Really nice to see you or not to see you. So feel free to stay as you are. And I don't mind questions during the talk. So if you don't, so you have some understanding questions, just raise your hand. And if I do not see the hand, just speak. Okay, we are not that big group, but if you have maybe like a bigger question, we can take it afterwards. Yeah. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, just one more adjustment here. And we will start. So I hope you can see my screen. You can. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about Luxembourg. We're gonna talk also about study conditions and a little bit about visualization. So we have two main aims for today. The first, I will try to answer the research question here. So does the background of the students has an influence on their study conditions and how they perceive study, how they're doing, and study in Luxembourg. And the second aim for today is to explore this topic through data visualization. So you should not understand this talk as I'm gonna tell you what to do it best or how to do it better. It's more like some input, some ideas, and we can discuss later on. So I'm also interested in your opinion, how you see it. Some words about data visualization. So at least in my understanding, there's two poles of data visualization: exploration and presentations, how we use data visualization for, and in between this understanding and interpretation is happening. And maybe you've already noticed this trend that more and more, we have more and more data visualization everywhere. And sometimes they are not so appealing, okay? So we also aim, like in research, to to make data visualization of our research. But here, I think we can sometimes do a better job. And on the other hand, like for example, data visualization in the media. So sometimes I'm really missing this very solid database and more explanation of where the numbers come from. Okay, so that's why I'm focusing also on this topic. But let me start with the case study Luxembourg. So let me tell you something about it. Probably you know where Luxembourg is. A lot of people do not, so don't worry. So that's the dot, the blue dot on the map. That's Luxembourg, so to say, in the heart of Europe. Here is a little bit bigger, okay. So what is the situation? What is the landscape of higher education in Luxembourg? So the first and the only national university of the country was founded in 2003. Okay, so they have now the 20th anniversary. And before that, there were no fully fledged institutions there, okay? Meaning that all the young people who wanted to study, they had to go abroad. And the country had many bilateral agreements with other countries, coming also from 19th century, but mostly with the neighboring countries, with Belgium, France, and Germany. So they sent their young people there to those countries, and they obtained their higher education degree, and very often they came back to Luxembourg. So this tradition of study abroad was very strong, and that was the only path to get higher education diploma. And when Luxembourg decided for its own national university, it also wanted that people maintain this tradition of study abroad. Okay, so we have like a little bit dilemma. So we have our own national university, but still we want that young people go abroad, see like the broad world, but we need some students, yeah, to study at this new institution. That's why the focus was laid on international students. Okay, so to attract international students so that they come and study in Luxembourg to achieve this critical mass of student body so that the university can function. And this resulted in very diverse student body in Luxembourg, which allows also to answer many research questions. So let me just give you a glimpse how it looks like for the student year 22-23. We have only a little bit more than 1/3 of all students are really with Luxembourgish nationality. Then we have the neighboring countries, France, Germany, and Belgium. And if you're wondering why Portugal is so prominent here, the country itself, Luxembourg, has a long history with Portugal. So there were many guest workers from Portugal coming to Luxembourg. Then they stayed. And if they do not obtain Luxembourgish nationality, which wasn't that easy up to a few years ago, so they stayed with their Portugal nationality. That's why you see here Portugal on the in the fourth place. 2 words more about India and China. Also here, Luxembourg had some scholarships for students from these countries, but overall, we have international students with the focus on European students in Luxembourg. And what has to be said also that we have very different ratios of international students between different programs, so bachelor, master, and PhD. I didn't find any actual numbers, and they even deleted like old reports from the internet site. But what I recall, it was so in PhD programs you have 80-85% of international students. Master is like 60% more or less international students, and in bachelor you have the most of Luxembourgish students. Because they study for the professional, for the professions like being a teacher and so on. Okay. Okay, so we have this diverse international student body, and also in Luxembourg we have the country itself. It's very international now, with only 53% of inhabitants having Luxembourgish nationality, and the rest are foreign. Okay, so as you can see, the heterogeneity in Luxembourg, it's there. And let me tell just 2 more sentences about the previous findings coming from my PhD, from my study, how I came to this research questions. So I was focusing in my PhD on student mobility from Luxembourg. But of course, when you're in, and I did qualitative interviews, narrative interviews. So of course, people tell you like their stories of mobility, and we focused on some aspects. But they also talked about how they perceive their study time in Luxembourg, so how they perceive the institution. And there were some complaints about some institutional regulation, how the university works, how some departments work, about some regulation, how and where to go abroad, and also some remarks about students' life. Because when I did the interview 2015-16, the institution was still like 12 years old. Students started when maybe the university was 10-year-old. So still some buildings have been built, some facilities weren't there, and students complained a little bit about poor student life because there weren't that many students at the beginning. So I was always wondering how it developed for those young people studying in Luxembourg. That's how I came to this question, what we're answering today, the perceptions about study conditions and about the study, but looking at groups with different backgrounds. And what do I mean with the backgrounds? So I combined the educational and migration background of the students. And let me start with the two categories on the right. So we have a group of international students where not the respondent, not the parents, and the secondary school certificates not from Luxembourg, it's from other countries. Then we have the group with no migration backgrounds, but everything is from Luxembourg. And then we have this mixed categories, starting with first generation, where parents and respondents were born abroad, but the respondent ran through at least through the last part of school system in Luxembourg, having the secondary school certificate from Luxembourg. And the two remaining categories, second generation students, is where the students himself or herself were born already in Luxembourg, but the parents have migration backgrounds, one or two. And it's also a question followed me through like my entire career, this categories of migration background, because if you're from social sciences, so it's very often done like this, that if you're born abroad or your parents or your grandparents, then you just put to one category migration background. And I was always interested in these nuances between these migration categories. So we will have a look how it looks for Luxembourg. I'm going to use the data for EUROSTUDENT, the wave 7, because Luxembourg took part in this. The fieldwork was done 2019 up to 21. I'm focusing only on university students, so no other higher education institutions, and only on bachelor and master students, so no PhD students. Yeah, and we have still a small sample, almost 500 people, both small sample, and we're going to see also in a minute if it's problematic or not. Okay, so once again, to this diverse student body, here I did a comparison between countries from EUROSTUDENT from the data set, and you can indeed see that Luxembourg, the pattern for Luxembourg is really different. So we have almost half of the student body in the sample. Yeah, now we're talking from now just about sample, about the data. It's not from Luxembourg. International students are almost a half. And we have also really big groups with a migration backgrounds, and only 20%, 21% with no migration backgrounds, which is really much less than in other countries. But which is also helpful to answer this problematic questions about study and the migration background. Okay, so let me guide you through some areas of study and how those different groups, those 5 groups, perceive those areas. And we're going to start with performance rating. And so the students were asked how about their self-assessment, about their performance at the university, and they should do this comparison to other peers. Okay, so they were asking, you're like other peers, as good as other peers, or maybe you're doing much better or much worse. And here you can see the results by the group. So the first column is first generation, but what really jumps into your eye, I think it's this column for no migration background. So they had much more of this greenish answers, telling that they are their self-assessment. Okay, they're doing much better or somewhat better than other students group. And on the other hand, we have those group second generation, both parents, where we have very little, like only 1/4 of the students says that they are better, so much better, and rather they're just as good as other students. And I mentioned already that Luxembourg has a small sample. And if you're just like presenting the results for the sample, it's okay, just show the bar chart and that's the numbers. But if you would like to have also some information about the population, so you would like to translate these findings from the survey on the entire population Luxembourg, then the small sample leads you to bigger confidence intervals, yeah, so that the real parameter in the population really doesn't have to be as you calculate it based on the sample. And you can see here on the right side this interval, confidence intervals for each of the ratio per group and per category. Still, we see here some differences, yeah, in this greenish, in this positive answers, but you see that the real parameter in population doesn't have to be here 49, but can be much lower or much higher. So when we recall once again this bar chart based on the sample, we could say that, oh, there are like super many differences here. They are, but if we do the significance test, because we would like to say something about the population, then we see that we only have 3 significant differences between pairs. So the self-assessment of the first generation and students with no migration background is statistically significant from each other. The same for second generation, both parents and no migration background, and second generation, both parents and international students. Okay, so there's like only those 3 differences, really. I'm going to try to skip this, a lot of statistics in the next slides. But you got now this idea about having small sample and trying to find out something for your population. So let's have a look now at higher education attitude.
Sorry, Emilia.
Yeah.
I think that the slideshow is
yeah. Oh, you didn't. Okay,
yeah, the confidence
sorry.
intervals wasn't visible before.
Okay, so now you can see the confidence intervals.
Yeah.
You have to say something if I'm telling.
Yeah. Before we saw the left side.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just show you once again. So here you can see really the confidence intervals, saying that this statistics based on the sample are just like punctual. But if you have a look at the confidence intervals, you see that the real parameters in the population can be much higher or much lower. And here the statistically significant differences. We have just 3 pairs where they are really significant. Okay, so far so good. I will leave you just like a few more seconds that you really can have a look now at it. Okay, and now we go on to the higher education attitudes. So here the students were asked about their belonging to higher education. And as you can see here, once again, we have those 2 groups, no migration background and international students, that do feel as they more belong to higher education. And if we have a look at the statistically significant differences, indeed, we can state that this group of no migration background has different distribution, different values than all other groups. And the same is true for the international students. Okay. Here it's very similar. So here is not, the question is not about belonging, so the now situation, but more about the past of the students, how they thought if they would like or would be a part of higher education someday. And also here, now we're gonna look on those 2 categories, first generation and second generation, both parents. We can see that they are significantly different than, for example, here, students with no migration background, and international students. So also here, their perceptions about study, how they thought about study, their ideas about themselves and this higher education context differs from the other groups. And one last slide here in this area, and I think this is most problematic one. So because we covered already the past, the now, and now how they are thinking, how the students are thinking about their future in higher education, if they would like, or if they're thinking about abandoning higher education or staying there. And also here we have really differences, as we had before, between those groups, migration background and international student, in comparison to the students with some migration background, saying that those without this migration background and international students are rather thinking that they're gonna stay. Okay, so they do not thinking about leaving higher education. Okay, so far so good. Now we're gonna also have a look at student services, but very quickly. How those groups perceive student services offered by the university. And here, I'm not going to talk more about statistical significances, because the question here was a little bit different with the sixth category, don't need or don't want, but still we also can see here some patterns. So if you have a look, for example, at this question about study support services, we see that the students with non-migration background, 30% said that do not need or do not want the study services, whereas here the first generation and second generation with both parents, they needed more, and they do not say that they are sufficient. So I think here's also maybe like a red lamp for the institution. Yep. Then we have provision of learning facilities, and I think that's also interesting here. If we haven't looked especially at the international students, and you recall now that I told you that the ratio of international students differ between different programs like bachelor or master, and I think that this not so positive evaluation of provision of learning facilities among international students is caused by the fact that we have here a lot of master students that study already at another institution and have this comparison. But it's my guessing, so I didn't check it with the data because of the sample size as well. And here one last number from this area is how to support, balance my studies and paid job. And here you can see also this pattern in the data that the second generation and non-migration, they do not need or want this support, but first generation and international students here have multiple higher numbers of wanting, but they are not so happy about it at the end. Okay, so far so good. Now I've presented you like a lot of numbers and bar plots, and probably you forgot now what I presented you like 10 minutes ago. And I think that's a problem in data presentation, where you have just like one thing after another, and then next one, next one, next one. So what you maybe can grasp is really like this pattern, but not really concrete numbers. So here I was thinking, okay, how we can really communicate the result from scientific data in a more approachable way. Yeah, and let me guide you through. Now it's gonna start with some small explanation, and then I'm gonna show you what I came up with. So we're gonna now turn to a fourth area of this study, conditions about difficulties met during the study. So what you can see here are different difficulties here in the box. which student met or did not meet during the study. So from standard of work, how the standard of work, is it much or not, if they have difficulties with it or not, if they have difficulties with organizational issues and so on. And then you can see also here the percentage of students from each group that said, yes, I had problems with this area. So for example, the first dot for first generation would mean that 50% of students from this first generation group did mention some difficulties with standard, keeping up with standard of work, okay? And you also see here the confidence intervals. So the point is here, the value based on the sample. And if you would like to have some more information for the population, that's why I put the confidence intervals. All right, but then it's already a little bit complicated, okay? So we have, and we have only Luxembourg here. But imagine that you would like to compare Luxembourg with other countries. Then you would have much more points. And here we have just, not as we had in the slide before, like this lot of difficulties on one slide, but we have just here the difficulties or the percentage of students that meant some difficulties with standard of work. And here we have the point I explained before for Luxembourg, first generation. And also we see how the groups from other countries did, if they did better or not so good. If you would like to have this international comparison. But as I said, it's just one item, it's just one difficulty. If you would have a look at all difficulties at once, then it would be like this. And you can still see some patterns. So you can see that some difficulties, they are really not met by so many students. For example, in the second row, the second picture. So you see like the overall patterns, but you cannot read them. Okay, so let's be honest, it's not good. What you can do, maybe you can try to like put them together into one plot. Also here you can see like, okay, for some groups, they are not so, so they did not meet so many difficulties. If you have a look at the international students, they're rather in the bottom scale, yeah, the percentage of the students. Whereas here we have for second generation, both parents more spread. Yeah, so from some countries they met more difficulties, from some not. But it's still hard to read. Yeah. So what I was trying to to try to show it in a more simple way. I don't know if I really managed, but you can tell me this. So I would propose kind of heat map to map these patterns of, let's say, the patterns of inequality, yeah, in regarding to study conditions. So how can we read this map? You can see here in the rows, we have the countries from the survey, and in the columns, we have the difficulties met. Okay, going from standard of work up to other personnel. I just put, once again, those difficulties on the left-hand side so that you can really read it. And recall once again, when I here explained to you this 50% first generation students from Luxembourg said that they had some difficulties with standard of work. And you can also see, if you compare here this group with other groups, that indeed this group has the highest percent of yeses, so to say, among all other groups, okay? So here the first generation, 50% from this group said they had these difficulties, and that was higher than for second generation or international students or with students with non-migration background. That's why here the square is blue, because for Luxembourg, regarding the standard of work, the first generation students had the highest ratio of those saying, yes, I had difficulties with standard of work. And that's how this visualization is built. The thing is that if you see this, it's still quite messy. And there is a huge research area about data visualization and how human brain proceed with the data visualization. And although we think we are good with colors, we are not so good with colors. Okay, so we can see here maybe some patterns, but still we have to arrange these colors either in lengths or positions to be able to read it in a proper way. So that's what I've done in the second step. So I started from this matrix and I ordered it a little bit. So I ordered it per country by the group of students. Okay, and you see here for Luxembourg, for example, that we have the students from first generation, second generation, both groups, and the international students that had at least at one question the highest ratio of students having difficulties. But you don't see any migration any students with no migration backgrounds here. Okay, telling us that they are actually doing well because they didn't have the highest ratio and any difficulty. Okay, so it's how you can really have a look at different countries and compare a little bit the patterns between different groups. We can even go one step further and we can mix everything together. And when we ordered it again, we have some kind of pattern now on the left-hand side for the inequalities regarding the difficulties during the studies across the Europe, because we have like every difficulty for every country and the group with the highest ratio, that's the color. And you can see that indeed those students with some migration backgrounds, they are more often represented here. So they have more often across the whole country really problems with at least one condition. Whereas international students and students with no migration background, they also have some yeses on at least one difficulty, but not so many as the other students. So you can see here the pattern, there is something there. You can also take this European pattern and of course compare it with some particular countries here, with Luxembourg, because that's today's topic. And you can see here, this absence of no migration background. Okay, it's what really jumps into your eye. So when you see like this patterns, this distribution here, so when I saw it, so my question was, okay, so why second generation one parent in Luxembourg? Why they have like more difficulties than the others? Because I would assume that if you would have like one parent coming from Luxembourg, that maybe you should be better integrated, than if you have two parents coming from abroad. So I think when you see such a pattern, you start asking questions. Different from what I said from the European pattern is no migration background students really here in Luxembourg, which is good for this group. That's fine, that's good. But are the differences really so huge that they have no problems, or really systematically less problems than the other groups of the students? And one word about international students, because that was my focus for the years. If you read a lot of literature about international students, you could have this impression that they are not doing fine and not doing well. And I do acknowledge this. I know that it meets many difficulties, but if you have a look now here on this data set, this pattern, you see that they are actually doing well. Okay, so that actually those with from first generation and second generation, they have more difficulties, okay, or they're more prone here. And yes, what I mentioned at the beginning, if it's the second generation one, both parent, should it be a distinct category or not? I would say yes, it should be, because we see indeed different patterns for different countries depending on this category. What you also can do with this pattern, here I order it by the variable, so by the difficulty. And you can see here some patterns. So where we have, let's just give me one example or two. For example, here, we have here much more international students through other countries with problems in the area of financial difficulties, job obligation, and childcare or pregnancy. So you can here identify the area on the European level where international students are more meeting more difficulties. When we have a look, on the other hand, now on non-migration background, because I've been talking like now all time, the entire time, they don't have so many issues, but they also have issues, and such visualization can show you in which areas they have some problems, and here about job applications and also lack of motivation, yeah, and where the other groups are not so. But where, so what's the problem? There's always a problem. So if you simplify data, because you would like to have some patterns or present it maybe to some audiences which are not so familiar with statistics, you're always gonna lose some information. So what I presented in the first part, this confidence interval, it's not integrated here. What is not integrated, the sample sizes and so on. So it's always, yeah, it's simple, but because of it's simpler, maybe it doesn't have that many informations. Yeah, I'm looking at the time, and I think it's time to wrap up now the presentation. So what are the take-home messages from today, at least what I wrote for myself? So I try to answer this research question about the background of the students and their perception of study time in Luxembourg, and trying to answer the question, it's small and cozy. And yes, it's small and it has a small sample size, and it's gonna be always a problem if you have a small sample size and you want to do some research. Is it cozy? It is, but not for every group and not always, but it's differing. So for different groups, you have like different questions whether they did better or not, but still we saw this overall pattern that international students and students with no migration background were dealing with study a bit easier than the other groups. And the second aim for today, we had the exploring visualization techniques, or having a look at research results through the lens of data visualization. And so what I wanted to try out new ways to explore the data in this comparative perspective, what we saw at the end, not focusing on one country, but different groups, different countries, and how to really communicated it. So here more about science communication and how to do it in a appealing way for different audiences, what we have to do always. And I think it's really important to do it. Yeah, so thanks for sticking with me. Thank you. Merci with Luxembourg. Thank you, word. And I'm super happy to take your questions or remarks or ideas, how we think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Emilia. It was indeed really refreshing and very interesting. Any questions, comments, anything to add from anybody? You can either write your comment or question to the chat, or you can raise hand and let us know that you would like to ask or comment. It's absolutely welcome. Until our audience is getting ready for asking and commenting, maybe I can ask myself that I started wondering actually that how did you come to the topic of data visualization? Why you started being interested in that, and what do you think, which role has data visualization in communicating results of scientific studies in general?
It's a really good question. Thanks. So for me, I think it was a gradual process, starting also somehow with my students, because I teach a lot of statistics and we cover data. Now we cover data visualization, but when I started some years ago, that wasn't really that central. So you would use data visualization maybe to support something, but it wasn't really so engaging and interesting. And then I noticed that students really enjoy this topic because they have so much influence there, and it's quite easy in comparison to other statistical analysis, but it's not easy. and that's the point how I got interested, because you have to really have good command of statistic and how data is built, so what's behind and what you can show, what you cannot show, which data visualization you can use. So it really includes at the end very many milestones that we cover during our research, or students do in the studies. So that's how I came to it. And then also through science communication, because we see so many reports and they are not really engaging. And I was always like, hey, but we have to go out from academia and really share the results in a really engaging and nice way. And I think data visualization can be an answer. It isn't just the only answer. And then you see many data visualization of poor quality. And to counteract this, I also include this now in my statistic courses and really have this focus a little bit now. Yeah. So I think, and the second question, yeah, so it's important, but I think I already covered it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I can already see that Christina has a question, so please feel free.
Hello, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I have two comments. I think one is content related and one is more on the visualization argument. I found it super interesting that you split up these different groups. And I saw that you split up more, or you were more differentiating around the migration background, but the international students themselves, this is one group. And if we're thinking of Luxembourg, I think it could be interesting. And again, we're very restricted here in terms of numbers, but maybe splitting up a group of cross-border international students and non-cross-border international students, because I think, I mean, many of these international students are cross-border students who are just living across the border of France and Germany. Perhaps they're still living with their parents and so on. So in this sense, they're perhaps more comparable to a group of, or in many aspects, perhaps more comparable to a group of students who are actually more than the non-migration background students, although they might still be counting as international students in the sense that they are studying with different language in a language that is not their native language and so on. So I think they're somewhat like a hybrid between international students and local students somehow. So I think that could be interesting to split up this group of international students further, because their study and living conditions will be different from students coming from India or China studying in Luxembourg. And regarding the visualization, I find it super interesting and super helpful. But what I'm also wondering about is whether, I mean, like in the examples that you have made, you are trying to connect the different types of migration background and being an international students to study conditions and so on. But then what immediately came to my mind, okay, but some of these differences might be actually masked by being in a different degree type. Like, what would it look like if we just look at bachelor students or just at master students? And then I'm again then I immediately think of, we need to look at this in a more multivariate way. So what is your comment about this, that other people who might not be too sensitized about the multivariate thing and what is actually behind such bivariate relationships, that we do not draw wrong, or that other people not being so familiar with this thing, not drawing wrong conclusions, and then assuming, okay, being an international student causes being less satisfied with study conditions or something like that. So how can we deal with this? What is your comment about this?
Thank you very much, Christina, for your comments. I am completely with you with this international students and cross-border students, especially because of the language. You're based in Luxembourg because you know the, yeah? Did I understand? Yeah, because you know the...
At the moment not, but I used to.
It was used to be. Because at the University of Luxembourg, you have like 3 languages to study, so English, German, and French. And indeed, those living across the border in like Belgium, France, or Germany, it's much easier, what Christina said, to follow the courses, but also they can live at home. So they maybe are indeed more familiar to this no-migration background students. Yeah, so that would be also one distinctive category we could have a look at. I did not do it here, but I think it sounds promising. then you have to, but then you have to really explain it well. And I thought, like, if I put also this one in this talk, it's gonna be too much. But it's a very good point. Then this multivariate, yep, okay. What you ask, that these differences in different groups, maybe it's caused by the level of study. Yes, that could be. But then we have like the problem with sample size for Luxembourg, that you're gonna have like really groups that are less than 10 at the end. So it's gonna be always a problem for the small samples. And I don't know how to do it now in a better way. What you could do still, you could do it like differently, maybe for bachelor and master, and have this as distinction. And this, because if you combine some conditions, then you have the small sample sizes. And about multivariate analysis, I think it's really tricky thing here to communicate this multivariate analysis. But what I did in some of my reports is that I have like this very general part when I think like it's gonna be for general audience, and still I have some statistical annex so that they can really like have a look in the detail what was done. I think this methodological part is really important to be there, and it's easier done in a report where people can read it. If you have a presentation and have to explain this multivariate and with significances and so on, it's getting tricky. But still, I think it should be explained. It's not just mentioned. I didn't explain it now here. But I think it depends on the public, like who you're talking to. I would say that would be like the very general answer. And you also pointed out a point also going through my mind about data visualization. And it can be very easily copied. Yeah, copy and paste, easier than a text because it's so visual and you can use this graphic and so on. And I think here we have really more responsibility to describe the data in correct way and to also give some background information, not just a picture. Yeah.
Thank you, Christina, for the questions and comments, and also Amelia for answering. I think it's a really, really, really intriguing discussion. Any other questions from the audience? What I started wondering is more about the content, about the study conditions and the student services in Luxembourg. Which implications can we think of when we look back?
Yeah, let me just have a look once again at this. Also here, a good question, because why we are doing our research, okay? So why we're doing these reports and working for data. And I had I was in a fortunate situation here at the University of Cologne doing my last research project, also in cooperation with student services. So they really worked with my data, and I could work with them on the data, explaining what we talked about. Okay, but we have to have a look at this one and control, maybe put some other variables. But what are the implications? I think what we saw, for example, for study support services, which groups are rich or not. I think that would be first implication. So which groups really need the support or don't? That's the one way of thinking about it. But really, the question I would ask as an institution myself would be, okay, but do we really reach every student? Do they know that we exist? Do they know what kind of support we really offer? And also because we've seen the differences between groups, maybe we have to reach different groups in a different way through different channels. So that would be an implication I can think of.
Yes, indeed. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? It would be nice to hear maybe also what you are thinking about, especially the way of data visualization. Yeah, there is a question in chat. Yasin is asking that, could you have used a less sensitive measure to allocate the color to a difficulty? In the background, you could have used a more complex measure.
What's the thing? Could you have less sensitive measure? What's it meant with less sensitive?
I tried to explain myself.
Sorry, Yasin.
I will try to explain myself if everybody can hear me.
We cannot. I mean, I cannot hear you well.
Connection isn't good, I think, for Yasin. But maybe he can type it to the chat to explain further, and then we can answer as well.
I don't know, but I guess, but what is meant, because I used only the highest percent, like the group with the highest percentage of yeses. So maybe the question is about if we can maybe go more into this statistical significance, or can first calculate a measure and then translate it into visualization. I think it can be done, no problem. That was like the first idea how I did it. Of course, we can do it. But I don't know if the question was about. But then still we have to explain it. So I think the more complex issues we calculate, the more complex the data visualization would be. And then once again, I would always, the first question would be for whom I'm doing it, or which kind of information this group can proceed or want to proceed. And I think it's also an important one. And then you can, I think you can go for everything depending on the group. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see, maybe Yasin can let us know through the chat if he got an answer and if that was what he was meaning. Anyways, maybe one of my last questions would be that as you presented some findings on Luxembourg and also some findings on all countries from the EUROSTUDENT project, what do you think? Should we have closer look at the analysis for respective countries, or rather comparative approach of the EUROSTUDENT data?
Yeah, I think we need both. So I think we need these overall patterns when we having a look really like on every country, because then you can see a pattern. If you're just looking at one country, then you just see what's happening there. And it is like it is. Okay, so it's really like distinctive for this country. Yeah, the question is it distinctive for this country? But if you have a let's more look across the countries, you can see, okay, but that's the pattern in Europe. So that's like everybody else, or maybe we are so different. And then you starting asking this question, why we are different, how we are different. It's not a bad thing to be different, because maybe sometimes you have some just conditions and they lead to this situation. But I think only looking one country, it lets you maybe sometimes take the situation as it is. Whereas when you look more globally, it helps you to reflect more on what's going on in your country. But we also need to zoom in with this more sophisticated analysis and so on, to really be able to describe the situation in one particular country. Yeah. That would be my answer. And now I'm also seeing that Yasin answered. Yeah, when you could, you can use it, but of course you can take average marginal effect. But then if you, for example, and it's fine, but if you do like a policy presentation, I think then you have to explain it first. So if you're gonna come up only with, oh, and now I have visualization and that's average marginal effect, I don't know if they would understand at once, so it needs still some introduction, but of course it can be done. Yeah.
So it comes back to the main point that it's always about your audience, to who you are showing it. Yeah. Anyway, thanks. My last chance to ask and your last chance to comment or ask. So really, if there is still anything that you're interested in asking from Emilia, then now it's the time.
You can also write me an email.
It's always better in written. Yeah, and I think that it's okay for you if we we share the slides with the recording also. Then if someone wants to look at them later, I think it's fine as well. Or how do you feel?
So we have the recording. Yeah, we can. I will have to redo a little bit, maybe the slides, and then we can.
I will be in contact with you regarding that.
Good.
Yeah. And we still get the comments that it's very impressive and it's been super interesting. So yeah, I really think the same. It has been a really, really great presentation. And I think also very thought-provoking in that sense, that how we can really visualize research findings. And also I think when it's different from what is the traditional we also call, then it also sparks interest, even that maybe you are not so much into the topic even, but it's like, oh, it looks different. Maybe I should look into that. I think this is also a very, very nice addition. So yeah, thank you, Emilia, for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much for being here and for everybody taking part, for questions. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, also from me, thanks to the audience. And I can already say that next month, it will be the last episode of EUROSTUDENT Talks for this year. It will be the 14th of December, so you can already save the date. And we are going to follow our tradition, which means that the last webinar of the year will be so that we will gather student representatives from different European countries, and we will talk about their challenges, their expectations, and the current situation of student life in their home countries. So definitely stay tuned either via our mailing list or Twitter, and see you next time. And thanks for joining for today. Bye.